Hello, everyone. My name is Leo Espinosa, and I'm the Assistant Manager at MediaLex. And you are listening to MediaLex Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM in Lexington, Kentucky. I am here once more with Council Member of District 11th, Jennifer Reynolds, who's here to talk to us about what's going on at Council. Thank you for being with us again.
Of course. Thank you for having me. We're ready to start a new school year, a new fall session and council session.
Yes, and I hope it hasn't been too hectic yet.
Well, we're just getting started this week, so we have a lot on our plate, but that's pretty usual for us.
Yes, so let's start. What do you want to talk to us about?
Well, today there's several big items that are coming before council, and so we could start a little bit just touching on solar. I'm sure people have been following along, some folks, on our conversation about solar and where to put solar and how to regulate solar in our city and county. So it was an item in the Environmental Quality and Public Works Committee, and from there a work group was formed, and a few folks worked in a work group and then made some recommendations to council. Then council edited those recommendations. I'm sorry, it was worked on in committee, and those items were sent to council. Full council made amendments and changed things, and then it was decided that a work group would be started to address some of the concerns, to come up with another kind of draft for an ordinance. So the work group did that. Then the work group presented those changes to council. Then it was divided, a divided council, but it was decided that those changes would be sent. They have to be sent back to the Planning Commission for approval. They were sent to the Planning Commission, which is a group of volunteers on a city commission that makes a lot of decisions about our planning. And they changed that document and made amendments to that and suggested that we do not put solar panels on ag land. And then now that document is coming back to us this next Tuesday in work session, and then we will vote on it and decide, do we accept the proposal that the Planning Commission sent us, or do we do more work and change it again? I just think this topic has been very divisive. I think most of us on council and from what we've heard agree that we want to expand solar. We want to have solar on businesses, on roofs, and parking lots that aren't being used in various places. I think the main factor that people have not agreed on is, should we use any or what percent, if any, on agricultural land? We talk a lot about our urban service boundary, the boundary for the city, being strong in that, being very careful when we expand that. And so that's why for some of us, it doesn't seem logical to say it's okay to put solar on agricultural land when we're trying to protect our agricultural land, because solar usually takes up a lot of space. It goes in for a very long time. The contracts last many, many years. There's not a clear way of saying, what do you do when no one's using it anymore? There's a lot of things to consider. And so I think that's really the main discussion that council has had around solar is, do we put it on ag land or do we not?
What about revenue for the city?
If it's on city land, that's one thing, right? Because they would have to lease that land. And, that's like what we're doing on the old Haley Pike landfill. And that's a different circumstance. That land, part of it is considered agricultural land, but most of it honestly can't be used because it's on a landfill. So that's a little different than the discussion of, are we putting it on ag land? And I think, when we put it on ag land, those are private properties. They would still have to pay, regular price for property tax and everything else. But we've looked at community agreements where we have an agreement that the business has to, give some money back to the community. And so I think that's something that we're definitely considering. But it's not like if we had a solar project on a private property that would be creating a lot of extra revenue for the city or anything like that.
Yes. And speaking about energy and public disagreement and comments, I was wondering about data centers. There was a big public comment event last month. I think it lasted like 6 hours.
Yes. So I'm sure you have been thinking about data centers because that's what everybody's thinking about. And every time I turn on the radio, that's what everybody's talking about across the country. I think we're seeing now the consequence of, the technology that we consume and the need for these data centers pop up all over the world and the country. And so it's been such a hot topic. We have received hundreds of emails and comments from people about their opinions about them. And yes, the Planning Commission had a meeting where they discussed data centers and the legislation that the planning staff gave to them as a draft to work from. And that meeting lasted over 5 hours between the public comment. Lots and lots of people were at the meeting, and also the Planning Commission members discussing, what the planning staff had proposed to them. They decided to take what the planning staff proposed. The planning staff proposed something because the council tasked them with coming up with something. And then the Planning Commission, like I said before, it's a group of people that they are made up of volunteers that are appointed by the mayor. And they looked at it, took the feedback, and they changed that draft a lot. And then now that draft is going to come back to us on council on August 25th. And so then council will decide, do we look at that in a special meeting? Do we look at it then? Do we send it back to committee? We are going to decide how we're going to approach making additional changes or going over the document that was sent to us. So this conversation has stemmed out of a company that wanted to buy the old Lexmark site off of Oliver Lewis, or Newtown Pike, excuse me. And they basically would use the space for office spaces. And then also they would use it to rent out space to businesses, healthcare companies, folks that needed space for data. So I think that scared everybody because, we've seen how these data centers on a hyperscale have been problematic. But what I don't think people realize is that we already have data centers in Lexington. We already have ones that are renting out space to other groups. We have ones that have their own for their own business or institution. And that data centers of all sorts are necessary in order to have phones, internet, computer systems, our medical systems, our charting, our higher education, all need data centers in some way or shape or form. And so I think people aren't as concerned about the smaller scale ones because, like I said, they're operating and people don't even know they're operating and where they are in Lexington, and they're not bothering anyone. They're not causing a noise problem. They're not causing an issue with the utilities. But what I think people are really concerned about are these large scale ones that could have larger consequences. I don't think that is on the table right now in Lexington. I don't think that's something that's actually being proposed. And I don't think that that's something that I think, from my perspective, that the council wants to have in Lexington. I think we're talking about for the smaller and mid-size scale, what are we going to land on? What regulations are we going to put in place? And how big is too big? And how much consumption of utilities is too much? And how much noise is too much? How much noise is already happening that you don't even realize is at the same level, So all of those details are what we're trying to figure out.
Mm-hmm. And do you know maybe talk to us a little bit about the specifics of the changes that the Planning Commission made?
Well, they really had to do with, location, proximity to buildings, making it the proximity to certain things like schools and parks and nursing homes, et cetera, further away. I think it was like 1,500 feet. They also wanted to make sure that the size was smaller. They wanted to make sure that the noise was less. But some of those numbers were kind of just thrown out there. So that's what we're going to be looking at as, should it be based on usage of power? Should it be based on square footage? How far from things? If it's a noise issue, what is the noise level? And who's going to regulate that? Who's going to check into that and make sure that they're complying? Do they have to use their own energy sources, or are they using our public? So some of it, we haven't seen the document yet. It hasn't come back to us in full. So we just heard some of the, the comments that they made in that meeting. I think some folks didn't realize that, most of the council members were listening to that meeting. It wasn't like we were not listening to it. And so they just kind of basically said the draft that they received was not strict enough, and they kind of lowered all of the numbers for what was allowed.
It just seems like this subject is not going away anytime soon.
I don't think so. I think this is a national big topic subject. You have communities that have a lot of land available who want these because to them it does help the city because they receive a lot of property tax in those areas. In Lexington, we don't receive very much property tax, so that's not a benefit to us. The city doesn't receive hardly any of the property tax, which people don't realize actually. And so, what benefit is it? Does it have jobs? Is it helping us? But I do think with data, what folks don't know is that if you're consuming data, then
we all do.
We all consume data of some sort. I think the biggest thing that is a hot topic is the AI part, right? Because that's new that we're all consuming that. But every day we all consume other types of data, even if we don't use AI. And our data has to be processed somewhere. So if we don't have data centers or the ones that are already in existence in Lexington right now, what would happen is we would have to pay more and we would not have as good quality internet if we have to put the data center, let's say, in Illinois. Then we're paying more money to send it to Illinois to come back to us, and we're not having high-speed internet because it takes longer to get there and back. So that's the argument for having data centers or even on a small scale, locally, is because that's going to be better for us. If we all want to stop using phones and computers and internet and MyChart and going to universities, then we can say we don't need them at all. But that's not the world we live in, and we've needed them for a really long time. I think the controversy now is we're adding more to that load, right? Because now AI takes more space to process that. So now we have to be conscientious of the consequences of our consumption, but then also realize that, there is a need. I think the other thing that we're looking at is how much need, right? Do we need to build a massive AI center, or maybe we don't need that big of a one? Maybe we just need a smaller one to fit our needs. But it's definitely a complex topic, and I do want people to know that we have been spending so much of our time on council, and I know the administration, as well as educating ourselves, investigating, listening to people. We don't want to do something that's bad for Lexington.
Now let's change to a different subject. How about we talked about the recommendations from the Homelessness Task Force? Yeah,
so the mayor appointed a task force with the intent of them coming up with some recommendations for the city, for council, on how to address basically the crisis that we have on homelessness in Lexington. And then the task force was broken up into several different groups that worked on different aspects. She appointed it because it was out of, we had a consultant do a study. And so that kind of was the impetus of her forming the task force. And they looked at supportive services and prevention, peer cities and shelter models, funding partnerships, and community engagement. Then they made a list of priorities, and they had a lot of priorities. But out of those came some main ones that they wanted to move forward. And they are, one, to have a temporary seasonal shelter until they could have transition to a permanent shelter. And they want the seasonal shelter to continue on the city's 1306 Versailles Road site until they can transition to a permanent shelter. And then they would like the permanent shelter to be at the same location. They are saying that there's already infrastructure there and that they would move all of the services that are currently there that are serving the city somewhere else, and that they would provide a transition to a permanent shelter, and that they would have at that shelter like a kind of an intake center where they would process people. And so they want it to be wraparound services to access so people can have case management and then get healthcare, legal aid, employment, job training opportunities, and be sent to the places that they need to go to receive those. So they're talking about having on that site eventually an intake center, but also a shelter that would probably serve seniors and families, because that's the biggest gap that we have right now. And then they're saying that there would also be that kind of intake model there, so that if someone needs to be dropped off, at any time of day or night, or they don't have somewhere to go, they don't know how to access resources, it would be an intake place where they could learn and go and be sent different places for various needs. They said that they would hold the residents of the shelter accountable to be good neighbors. They'd identify programming, and they would develop a plan to relocate all city operations and equipment to maximize space for shelter, housing, and supportive services at that location. So once again, that would be a 24-hour a day operated entity. They said the way that they would do this is identify an organization other than the city to manage and operate such a center and integrate it with the above described campus. So kind of like do an RFP to run and operate this. They would intake some referrals for emergency housing here, and they would provide services immediately and would not house all the individuals at that intake center, just the ones that are like the seniors and the families. So this would require having enough funding to do this, but also to RFP someone who would be willing to do it. Those are the main things that they're recommending right now for what they want to take action on immediately. So we heard from at the hearing on Tuesday, which was to get public comment. We heard from different folks around the community that echoed that this was a need and that they wanted to see something like this happen, that we just have big gaps in our system for serving the homeless. We also heard people from the 11th District say that they were tired of having all of these services in their area and on Versailles Road. So myself, representing that area, I can honestly say I understand that we have a huge need, and I understand that we need to respond to it. I think we do need some emergency beds, wraparound services, and an intake center are not a bad idea. I think what I am really concerned about is just the fact that, when you do something large like this on a main corridor, it is going to change the corridor. We already have a huge issue on that corridor with homelessness. And unfortunately, I don't think just having an emergency shelter intake center is going to take care of that. And I think people have become really comfortable, setting up home on other people's property or on public property. And I think that's a big issue that we need to discuss as well. And I guess I'm just concerned for the corridor, the foot traffic. If you walk on Loudon, there's a ton of foot traffic and people coming and going all the time. I think that's going to change the corridor completely. I think getting rid of the services that are at that location right now and putting them somewhere else could be problematic. And then, it is going to affect the businesses and the people that live there. And I just, I think that there are places where maybe would be a better location, but I think that, this group already decided that this was their best option. And I just think that the folks in the 11th district are not thrilled about that.
Yes, and so this is already set in stone. It cannot be changed?
So right now, these are just recommendations. And then my understanding is they're going to present these to the full council, and then we would vote to accept them or not accept them and how we would move forward on them. And I think these are their main recommendations. But until something, they're talking about doing an RFP. Once they do that, once they say we want someone to come and provide services, then that's set in stone. I do think that the folks on this task force, there's a lot of different people. I think that they do think that this is, the main thing that they want to occur. And I think, therefore, they will make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm afraid we are running out of time. Is there anything quick that you'd like to say?
Just that we looked on Tuesday at a drag racing ordinance, and I think that that's something that's going to come back up in our October Social Services and Public Safety Committee. A lot of folks drag race in Lexington, both officially and unofficially. I've seen it myself. And so this would just give, the public safety a little bit more tools to deal with that and consequences for folks' actions if they do get caught. So I think that's going to come back to us maybe with a little bit different language. But I do appreciate Councilmember Baxter for working on that.
Yes, I agree that we need more enforcement regarding drag racing.
Yes, that's the big key. Is we can legislate things, but we also need a lot more enforcement for traffic related issues. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time that we had today. Thank you once more for being with us.
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. I hope everybody has a good rest of their August.
Mm-hmm. And if you want to learn more about what Council is doing, you can always visit the local government webpage, lexingtonky.gov.
That's right. And you can find me at jreynolds@lexingtonky.gov.
And don't forget that you are listening to MediaLex Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM in Lexington, Kentucky.